You ready, Misty? We'll call to order the Montgomery County Board of Commissioners regular session June 15th, 2021, 6 p.m. to order. I'll ask Ms. Robinson, Dottie Robinson, if she'll say the invocation.
Let's all bow our heads. Father in heaven, we thank you for all your blessings, and we thank you also for the difficulties that we face. We know that during the difficult times that you're with us also, guiding and loving us to make us stronger. We pray for those who are sick and for those families that are grieving. Thank you for your presence tonight and for your guidance as we carry out the business of the county. We thank you for those that are present here with us tonight in this room and also for those who are joining us virtually. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Dottie. The next is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you are able to stand, join in with us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for that. The next item is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I will make a motion that we approve the agenda.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Dawson. Do I have a second?
A second.
Seconded by Commissioner Hassel. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next item is the consent agenda. Any questions or anything on there? One thing was the Juneteenth Day proclamation. I think you're here tonight, and we just wanted to thank you for working with that. I think you were working with the manager on that, and thank you for that. Anybody else have anything? Hearing none, do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
I make the motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Dottie Robinson. Do I have a second?
A second.
Seconded by Commissioner Kay Robinson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The next item is a public forum. Do we have anybody sign up, Misty? Is there anyone here that would like to speak at the public forum? Okay. We'll forego the rules on that then. The next item is an action item required for the public hearings, and we're going to try to do all three of these in one motion. So the motion is to appoint the county commissioners as the fire tax commission for Baden Lake, and also as the fire tax commission for Lake Tillery, and also the fire tax commission for the Wadeville Fire District. So we can take one motion and appoint all of these. Do I have a motion that we do that?
I make the motion that we recess as the Board of County Commissioners and convene as the Fire Tax Commission for Baden Lake, Lake Tillery, and Wadeville.
Have a motion by Commissioner Dottie Robinson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Hassel. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the public hearing number one, we're going to sit as the Baden Lake Fire Commission. So I need that motion. Actually, Dottie, I guess that should have been on this, and convene as the Baden Lake, the private. We'll do each one of these individually. So anyway, so I need that motion, I guess, again, or do we not, Frank? I mean, we were just...
The prior motion should have been to appoint the county commissioners as each individual board.
Yeah.
And then go into
Public comment.
And then the second one should
Session
be to be
individual.
recess as the county commissioners and go.
Okay.
So do you want to make that motion that we recess as county commissioners
I
and
make
do
the motion that we recess as county commissioners and that we appoint, I guess, ourselves
point the...
as the Baden Lake Fire Tax Commission.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Dottie Robinson. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Hassel. Do I have all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, now is the public comment period. If someone would like to speak, and I guess they're going to remain the same tax rate that they've had for this. And so if there's anyone here that would like to comment on the Baden Lake fire tax. No one's here.
So I will make a motion to close the public comment period.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Dawson to close the public comment period. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Hassel. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So I guess now we need a motion to recommend the 5.5 cent tax rate for the Baden Lake Fire Department. Someone like to make a motion that we,
I make the motion to recommend for fiscal year 21-22, the tax rate for Baden Lake at 5.5 cents.
motion's been made by Commissioner Dottie Robinson. Do I have a second?
A second.
Seconded by Commissioner Kay Robinson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And now I'd like a motion that we adjourn as the Baden Lake Fire Tax Commission and reconvene as the Board of Commissioners.
I make a motion that we adjourn as the Baden Lake Fire Commission and reconvene, yes, as the Board of Commissioners.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Hassel. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Commissioner Dawson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. So that's the first one out of the way.
Mhm.
Okay, the second one is I need a motion to recess as Board of Commissioners and convene as the Lake Tillery Fire Tax Commission.
I will make a motion that we recess as Board of Commissioners and convene as the Lake Tillery Fire Tax Commission.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Dawson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Hassel. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We will now open it for public comment. Is there anyone here to speak for the Lake Tillery? No one here? Can I have a motion to close the public comment period?
I make a motion to close the public comment period.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Hassel. Do I have a second? Seconded by Commissioner Kay Robinson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The next part is a motion to recommend the FY 21-22 tax rate of 4 cents for the Lake Tillery Fire Department. Do I have a motion?
I will make a motion to recommend fiscal year 21-22 tax rate at 4 cents.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Dawson. Do I have a second?
A second.
Seconded by Commissioner Dottie Robinson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I need a motion to adjourn as the Lake Tillery Fire Tax Commission and reconvene as the Board of Commissioners.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn as the Lake Tillery Fire Tax Commission and reconvene as the Board of Commissioners.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Dawson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Hassel. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Public hearing number 3 is the Wadeville Fire Tax Commission. Need a motion to recess as the Board of Commissioners and convene as the Wadeville Fire Tax Commission.
I make a motion that we recess as Board of Commission and convene as Wadeville Fire.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Kay Robinson. Do I have a second?
A second.
Seconded by Commissioner Dottie Robinson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll now open the public comment period for the Wadeville Fire Tax Commission. Is there anyone here that would like to speak concerning the Wadeville Fire Tax? Seeing no one's here, can I get a motion to close the public comment period for Wadeville Fire Tax Commission?
I'll make a motion to close the public comment period.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Hassel. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Dawson. All in favor?
Aye.
So next, we need a motion to accept the tax rate for 21-22, tax rate of 2.5 cent. It was 1 cent.
Correct.
Do I have a motion that we accept this tax rate for Wadeville?
I will make a motion to recommend fiscal year 21-22 tax rate of 2.5 cents.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Dawson. Do I have a second?
A second.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Dottie Robinson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So now I need a motion to adjourn as the Wadeville Fire Tax Commission and reconvene as the Board of Commissioners.
Make a motion to adjourn as Wadeville Fire Tax Commission and reconvene as the Board of Commissioners.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Hassel. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Dawson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Public hearing number 4 is the fiscal year 21-22, the county budget. We'll open it up for public comment period. Is there anyone here that would like to speak about the county budget? Anyone here to speak? I guess then I need a motion to close the public comment period for the county budget.
I'll make a motion to close public comment period.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Dawson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Hassel. All in favor?
Aye.
The next is the motion to adopt the FY 21-22 county budget ordinance and fee schedule. Someone like to make a motion that we accept the budget as written?
I will make a motion to adopt the fiscal year 21-22 county budget ordinance and fee schedule.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Dawson. Do I have a second?
A second.
Seconded by Commissioner Dottie Robinson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, public hearing number 5. This is the changes to 160D, and we have Mr. Putnam here to present the staff presentation to us.
Well, good evening, Board of Commissioners. Today we are talking about Tax Amendment 1, 2021. These are the mandated 160D changes imposed by the state of North Carolina. And also we have option to include additional changes to the ordinance to further update it in growing trends of zoning regulation and subdivision regulation across the state. So just briefly, I want to talk about what 160D changes are. So 160D is a new chapter of the North Carolina General Statutes. Essentially what it's doing is it is consolidating the municipal and the county development regulations into one regulation. So the 160D changes because of that. Everyone has to do them because there's something new for everyone, as I like to put it. So there's some new stuff for local jurisdictions and municipalities, and then there's some new stuff for counties because, again, they're marrying these two general statutes that otherwise didn't communicate to each other. So the state of North Carolina, after a few, they had originally anticipated that the local changes would go into effect by January of this year. Well, they offered extended deadlines for local jurisdictions to adopt these changes. And so the new deadline we're faced with is we must adopt these changes by July 1st. So it's got to happen this meeting. Now, another component of 160D changes, which is for future discussion, they demand that a county or local jurisdiction, whoever that is doing zoning, that is doing subdivision, it requires those governing bodies to adopt a reasonably updated comprehensive plan by July 1st, 2022. So, again, that's something that we'll talk about a little bit later after this meeting, I think, but I mentioned that here to say the 160D changes go on. So, real briefly, I want to do the 160D changes that are mandated. Every one of you got a 300-page version of the Code of Ordinances. I apologize about that. As you could see, the changes are substantial. Instead of going line by line, I think what would do this justice is if I went and hit each of the categories. After the presentation, what we are going to have to do is, truthfully, well, we don't have to do it, but it's the easiest way to go about this, is to actually readopt the Code of Ordinances altogether. There is an alternative if you don't want to do that, but it's doing multiple ordinance amendments all at once. So, by category, these changes were in terminology and citations, geographic jurisdictions, boards, land use administration, substances of zoning ordinances, substances of other development ordinances, comprehensive plans like I mentioned previously, legislative decisions, quasi-judicial decisions, administrative decisions, vested rights and permit choices, and finally, judicial review. So those are the required changes. The planning board, with these check marks I've placed, and I've also placed some X marks. When there's a check mark, that means that the planning board, as an advisory group, has recommended that you adopt those changes. So the planning board is recommending we adopt these mandated 160D changes. Ooh, I think my clicker stopped working. There we go. So, as I mentioned, we use this as an opportunity to also do additional and optional changes. So, these are things like conditional use permits to special use permits, conditional zoning, the inclusion of that, subdivision guarantees to help streamline the process of subdivision and development, final plat authorizations from planning board to planner, it's just bringing it up to speed, the Board of Adjustments, offering an opportunity for the planning board to be appointed as the Board of Adjustments. Accessory lots and residential storage units. This one's unique. We'll get into a little bit later. Major and minor modifications. Photovoltaic facilities or solar farms, moving from a permitted use to a special use. And then major subdivision standard changes. Nope, froze up on me again. There we go. So the planning board is recommending we adopt the conditional use list here into special uses. These include everything listed under R1, R2, commercial, and that list continues all the way over to industrial. Now, everything that's a special use, well, a conditional use right now, is not included on this list because we also are proposing to include conditional zoning. So what is conditional zoning? Conditional zoning establishes a new district for every one of these industrial, residential, and commercial districts. Froze up again. And what it does is that it says, rather than letting you rezone to a commercial where there's an array of uses, if you come to me and you've got an R1 property and you want to rezone that to commercial, well, there's this new tool called conditional zoning that only lets you do that use. So in the past, some things that have happened have been, people will rezone from residential 1 to residential 3 and under the guise of doing something else, but then they turn around and they do a campground or something similar. So this is a tool to prevent that from happening. Another inclusion that we're proposing with this is the inclusion of community meetings. See, these are things that the applicant would actually go about doing. So traditionally, we have 2 public meetings. We've got the public hearing with the county commissioners, and we've got the public hearing with the planning board. Well, with the inclusion of community meetings, there's also a meeting that the applicant has to have with the community that's directly affected by the property. It's offering more opportunities for public input because these decisions that we're talking about here are legislative. So it's like really changing the laws, and it can affect a lot of people. The conditional zoning list, as I mentioned before, not everything was carried over from conditional uses to special uses. So those that weren't carried over are being offered in the conditional zoning list. Now, one thing that I mentioned to the planning board, this was a topic of a lot of discussion, was is this list refined enough? Have we researched this enough? The answer was no. More thought, more discussion need to be had about what uses are going to be under what category throughout the county, but this is a good start. This provides the mechanisms and the tools to be in place for then those other discussions to be had. So this list right now is everything under commercial and industrial. As you can see, there's really no conditional zoning uses that are being proposed for residential zones, but that's okay. This puts the tool in place so that there can be in the future. Next, I would like to just briefly touch on subdivision guarantees. So right now, when a big subdivider comes in and they put in an application to Montgomery County Planning and Zoning to subdivide their property, might be 100 acres, they want to build 300 some lots, well, 200 lots, excuse me. The subdivider can garnish preliminary approval of that. From that preliminary approval point, they have 1 year to get final plat approval. And when you're talking about large subdivisions, that means installing all of the infrastructure that would need to go along with that ahead of getting final plat approval. So what subdivision guarantees do are they offer a tool for the developer to say, we're going to guarantee that we will install that infrastructure, but we want to record this final plat so we know we've got this property before spending hundreds of thousands of dollars sometimes on infrastructure. And the guarantee is typically, there's a variety of guarantees that we can do, but the guarantees in the ordinance, they say that, really to trigger that, we'd be looking at 125% of the total estimated cost. That way, if the developer bails, we still have a guarantee. In the form of a bond, though, we still have a guarantee. Do you guys have any questions about briefly what I went over? It's like 3 buckets of things.
Yeah. I'm tracking slightly, yeah.
Yeah. Well, guarantees, rest assured, guarantees are widely used. They're not foreign, they're not new, they're pretty common, and they're a very useful tool in developing. So as I mentioned before, with subdivisions and major subdivisions in particular, the plat review, preliminary plat process, and the final plat process, it is somewhat exhaustive. And so if a developer wants to record a final plat, even though it's an administrative decision, if they check all the boxes, they still need the planning board to approve them to record the final plat, even though the planning board doesn't legally have the authority to deny them the final plat. And so what this does is this takes that responsibility away from the planning board, but offers it, the planning board would like that if they impose conditions on the preliminary plat, that it comes back to them for final plat approval. But again, this is another tool to help streamline the process of Montgomery County development. Okay? So it's designating the planning director or his designee or her designee the ability to approve final plats. So in this sense, a developer could come to the planning board, offer their preliminary plat, go through the public hearing process, secure their preliminary plat, turn around very quickly with a guarantee to deploy the infrastructure, and then go on to record final plat. Or more appropriately, get final plat approval. So that is final plat authorization. Another proposed change that I would like to talk about is the Board of Adjustments. So currently, the only authority for the Board of Adjustments is the county commissioners in Montgomery County. Well, with this proposed change, we're providing a tool that would allow you to appoint the planning board as the Board of Adjustments. And so appointing the planning board as the Board of Adjustments would take away all the quasi-judicial decisions that I believe last time we had 8 of them that I've presented on to the county commissioners. Those quasi-judicial decisions are variances, they will be special use permits, they are appeals, and the list goes on to watershed variances, which we'll get into a little bit later, and other things that are more like court cases.
David, do you know, I know there's very few counties across the state that the Board of Adjustments actually sits with the Board of County Commissioners. Do you know that number? I read it somewhere. It's very, very, very small.
I do not know the number off the top of my head, but it is because of the sensitive nature of that relationship.
Right.
And so it is a very wise decision to appoint the planning board or offer the tools to appoint the planning board as the Board of Adjustments, which is much more common in rural counties. And as you can see, the planning board would like that responsibility.
Just stop there.
Okay, so this optional change we do need to have a little bit more in-depth discussion about. So what's being proposed here is a residential storage facility. Rest assured, this, again, nothing being proposed here is by any means a new tool that's not been deployed anywhere else. This is something that Davidson County actually does quite often. And so what a residential storage facility is imagine you have a waterfront lot. We all know the waterfront lots in Montgomery County are highly restrictive. They're tiny. You don't have a lot of space on them. We get a lot of variance requests for those lots. Well, some people, actually quite a few people, they will purchase land in Montgomery County like that waterfront lot and the lot directly across the street in the hopes that they could build a garage or something else that they could use with their land. Right now, that is not a permitted use. So people that buy the lot across the street are simply holding on to it until they can one day build a garage or they build a house there, or the rules of Montgomery County relax, or they go through a variance process. So what a residential storage facility would look like is exactly what's prescribed here. Except the planning board, I should mention, they are not recommending this no outdoor storage will be permitted. Bullet point. So they are asking that be taken off. I apologize that it was included.
So when we say outdoor storage, what would that mean?
That would mean parking a
Boats and...
boat right beside the storage facility. And what a residential storage facility truly is, it's a garage. And right now, because the intent of these lots that these places are zoned as, they're zoned residential. The intent of a residential property is to promote dwelling units. Well, that means that you cannot have buildings as primary structures that are not dwelling units. So you cannot have a standalone lot with a garage on it. Now, the way we've tried to do this, and you can see there's a checkbox and an X box on that. So this is kind of our first instance of that. The way we've tried to do this is define a new lot, an accessory lot, something that's across the street, separated by road or natural buffer that would otherwise be contiguous to a primary lot. And then the other one is to allow, well, as I mentioned, that would allow the bypass of the intent of the residential zone properties. Now, the planning board, one question I posed to them, would you rather see, or would you like to see, I should say, that the lot across the street is recombined with that lot? And so what that means, and that is what they're recommending, and what that means is that this doesn't just let someone build a garage on this one of these parcels, and then as soon as they build that garage, which is permitted under the ordinance because it's an accessory lot, they can then
Sell their
discharge that property and sell it to someone else who lives maybe down the road and just wants a garage. So recombining, the planning board's recommending that recombination be included as a tool to prevent that from happening. It's not going to capture all of these instances, but we know that the lots are highly restrictive. It will be unlikely that they are able to subdivide those lots if they recombine them.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So since this is an instance where, we have one of these X's and a check marks, do you guys have any questions on that? Would you like to go forward with the planning board's recommendation?
I think so.
I would, that makes sense if
Mhm.
the board agrees. And I know just recently we had something we met, of course it was a different situation, but he was recombining his lots in
Yes.
order to.
Right.
So I think that would, again, keep from strange things happening in the future.
Yes, and this is exactly what Mr. Penland,
Yes,
who was
that was his
that
name,
variance
yes.
case,
Mhm.
Mr. Penland wanted to use this tool, but we simply hadn't had it adopted.
Mhm.
So,
I'm just always in that mood where if it's your land, if you're not building a hog parlor or something that's gonna stink up the neighborhood,
right.
then build what you want on it, up 40 foot high or right up to the 1 inch line.
Certainly, yeah.
But
I mean, we all have those opinions.
Yeah.
Yeah. We all have different opinions on zoning ordinances and development regulations, and I think that's what makes tools like these, I'm going to sound like a nerd, but exciting. Because then we can give people what they want and we don't have to tie up land. Because if we don't do this, then people are just holding those lots across the street and nothing's going to happen to them.
Because they can't do anything
Because
with
they
it,
can't do
right?
anything.
Yeah.
So it doesn't sound like there's much discussion. We'll move forward with that one. Now, major and minor modification inclusions. So this is something that's pretty typical with boards of varying sizes, of varying disciplines. What major modifications are things that drastically change what's being proposed. So let's take a plat, for instance. Let's take a preliminary plat. If a developer comes to us and they say, I want to build 10 lots, and they get the preliminary plat approved, and then 2 weeks later they come back to us and they say, well, I said I wanted to do 10, but now I want to do 20. That is a major modification. So that is something that would need board approval to happen, and we have to define that. If we want to include minor modifications, boards across the world use minor modifications as a tool to do editorial changes on documents, to lightly change something that is a little bit ridiculous to take back to the board. Let's say in this comp plan that we currently have, or the ordinance for that matter, let's say I, as a planning director, notice a spelling error. Well, if I wanted to actually change that, I would need to come to the county commissioners and the planning board to get that changed. Minor modifications give the authority of a responsible party. It could be the county manager, it could be the designated planning director, zoning administrator, whoever. It gives that person the authority to make those changes, those minor modifications. So I think we'll spend quite a bit of time on this slide. There's two decisions in this one. So there's photovoltaic facilities with standards, which we'll start with first. So it was proposed that photovoltaic facility be changed from a permitted use to a special use. I think the precedence behind that is exactly what we saw at the last county commissioners meeting, where there was a permitted by right solar farm facility, but there was the potential that they would landlock people. Well, unless they had to come to the commissioners and seek a variance, they could landlock people. And the board could not have imposed that before granting of that variance, some accessibility agreement be made. So, these are changing photovoltaic facilities from permitted to special, or as the planning board would like to see it, conditional zoned. Make sure that, the public does have an opportunity to come to the table, because it has to go towards a board. It has to go to the board for approval. Now, like I said, the planning board would like to see this as a conditional zone, not as a special use permit, which I had proposed. The reason they would like to see it as a conditional zone is that with this potential change, that the planning board be the board of adjustments, there's only one public hearing. If it is changed to a conditional zone, it is 3 public hearings. 2 formal public hearings and 1 community hearing.
Yeah.
So that is what the planning board is recommending for solar farms or photovoltaic facilities. Since this is one of those check boxes with a X, do you guys have any questions on that?
So making it conditional zoning allows more opportunity for community input.
Correct.
Yeah, so I think that's a good thing.
And that should be the rhetoric moving forward, So if you see something, when we do have those further discussions about the use table or the use list as it is right now, and we notice, and this is just an example, I'm not saying it's true, junkyards, special use permit. Well, if we get a lot of people saying, I didn't get to participate in that public hearing, then maybe it should be a conditional zone. But the decisions change a little bit too. So that's something to keep in mind. We'll get into that later. We don't want to do it tonight. It's too much tonight. Are there any more questions on that conditional zone photovoltaic facility piece?
Everybody in agreement with what the planning board recommends? Okay.
Okay. So this next piece is having to deal with major subdivisions standard changes. So right now, there is a rule in major subdivision ordinance of Montgomery County that says any subdivision has to have a 50-foot buffer in addition to normal lot size and depth required, adjacent to all railroads, limited access highways, residential, I added the other there, commercial or industrial development, or any public development, excuse me. So the planning board did not recommend this, and I'll get into a little bit later. You must be wondering why. Now, the other element that I propose is exactly what's underlined. I try and define other residential in that same section. And we say other residential development is identified as unassociated residential development. The planning board shall have the authority to determine whether a residential development is unassociated. I know that's confusing. It's a word jumble. So there is a situation right now that this rule afflicts. Right now there's a development going on within an existing neighborhood. It's lots. It's going to be managed by the same HOA. It's going to be in the same neighborhood. People aren't going to know the difference who live there. It's only kind of in Montgomery County's eyes that it would be something different. Well, adding that would allow them to not have a 50-foot buffer between, the existing neighborhood and this new development that by any other expense would be considered a part of that neighborhood. So that is just one example of what this, the ordinance as it currently stands and what this would essentially offer for developments like that in the future.
So what was the planning board's issue with it?
So that's a good question, and I did not touch on that. They said that they did not want to offer a means for developers to phase out development, like in this situation, maybe 5-10 years down the road. Because without this change, the developers have to come to the planning board and seek a variance. And so their intent is to preserve the ordinance as the way it is so that it could be an instrument to deter developers from spreading out that development like that. But I think, and this is exactly what I recommended to the planning board, is I think there are more useful instruments to achieve that. And so, you know, I'm glad the planning boards, again, they're not recommending that we move forward with that change, but I'm glad to answer any questions you guys might have on that, because I know it is pretty technical.
So let me speak it back to you so to make sure I understand.
Right.
So currently, what we have in place, if a neighborhood exists and a development is coming in right beside it, like right next door to it, with the ordinance as it sits, they would need a 50-foot buffer in between a house that's being built,
Right.
new neighborhood in comparison to what exists, correct? And that may not be what the buffer is in between the homes that are existing there, correct? So I don't know what the ordinance is, but it's less than 50 foot. So to make it look uniform, the neighborhood, where you're suggesting we remove that, if it's kind of a congruent, right, something that's coming together, to remove that requirement.
Yeah.
Is that
So-
what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying that I would like to see some additional flexibilities.
Right.
So let's say town A and town B just really don't like each other. Okay? And they're very clearly two different neighborhoods. Well, in that sense, it might be good that that 50-foot buffer is preserved, right? But if we're talking about a development that's owned by the same developer, that's owned by the same HOA, all the lots are going to look the same, all the houses are going to look the same. Right now, that flexibility is not there to accommodate that. And instead, it ties up that land.
unless they
50
see-
foot is a lot of land.
Unless they seek a variance, right?
Unless they seek a variance, which could get turned down.
Right.
And then they go through the appeals process. So this change would allow the planning board to come to a determination of whether a residential development is unassociated or associated.
Okay. Thoughts, guys?
Yeah, I think it's good.
So in the
I mean,
case of that developer, then he's gonna have to, if this is not done, then he's gonna have to come back to request a variance? Is that
Yes.
what's gonna have to happen?
That's correct.
So that could delay him developing that additional property.
Yeah, and we've actually got a variance application that's not yet complete, so we can't process it, but I'm working with the developer. The development's, you know, to his account, the development's not gonna happen if the variance is denied. So if the variance is denied, he's not gonna build the land, or he's not gonna subdivide it.
Because if you're looking at a lake lot and you're looking at 50 feet, that could really
Yes, it
cut
could.
it back. In addition to, like you said, he may not develop it if he doesn't get the variance.
Right.
And if it's a sizable development, then we're gonna be losing.
Yeah.
And who's deeming, so the planning board would make the decision whether it's an associated or an unassociated? So if it's an associated development, then it
Right.
could work, not have to have that 50 foot. But if it is an unassociated, then you would have the ability to
Right.
keep those things in place.
And because so the developer would offer this in included with their preliminary plat approval. They would present their case for this designation during the preliminary plat approval process. But because the decision at that point, remember we talked about the three, I was holding up two, three decisions are legislative, quasi-judicial, administrative. The decision at that point would be an administrative decision. The planning board must approve it's a very black and white distinction. Is it associated or is it unassociated?
Okay.
They do not, they must use their best judgment, provided with the evidence that's been sent before them, to come up to that determination.
And what was it our planning board said?
What's
They
that?
said that, when our planning board was talking about this, what was it they said? They didn't want to do this?
They didn't say that they didn't want to do it. They simply said that they would like to preserve the idea of a variance to be used as a tool to deter multi-year development. So they would like to use the variance as an opportunity to, I don't want to say to punish, but to tell the developer, hey, don't, if you have this vision of a larger development,
When you
be
first
up
come
front
in,
with it.
apply.
Yeah, be up front with it. But in this particular case, this happened many, many years ago.
Yeah.
But of course, they'll have the ability if the developer is developing a second part of it,
Right.
to have to deal with associated, unassociated during plat review anyway, correct? So
Correct.
they'll kind of have that authority if they chose to mark it as unassociated, then you'd have to go through the variance process, correct?
That's true.
So-
Now, the other option here is that similar to this change, this is a discussion. The county commissioners can change this right here, right now, and they could say that the planning director or his or her designee be the one that determines whether development is associated or unassociated.
No, I believe if the planning board has, if they have some strong opinions about that, I think I would prefer to let it go to the, so that they get to at least have that buy-in, weigh in at the beginning of the process, if we move forward with, which I'm good with moving forward with your change. I am, would have to, but,
Well, I'm not going to get my feelings hurt.
no, I know, so, but I will keep it where the planning board has to be the one that deems that.
Okay. Sounds like there's.
Any other conversation?
I'm fine with it.
Okay.
Makes sense to me, like I say, I don't know who wrote all this stuff up to start with.
Mistake.
Yes, I know. There's a. Well, I want to know too, and
Did you see the
To be-
300 and some pages, Mom?
yeah, to be truthful, I would like to shake their hand because that is a lot of work. Actually, I do know the person. The gentleman goes by the name of Scott Carpenter. He's a assistant county manager on the coast now. I think it's Carteret County. So, yeah, he's a. Well, we're gonna move on.
He's just trying to keep us small.
That's right. He's just trying to keep us
We
small.
want to see some tax dollars come in.
We are almost done, I promise. So, the last change, which, again, I don't get my feelings hurt with this stuff. So, staff had proposed soil man, this is a very confusing one.
Oh, Lord.
So, right now, there are watershed regulations imposed by the state. And there always will be. They date back to, I think I researched the 40s, the 50s maybe?
It's been a while.
It's been a while. So right now, those regulations are in place, and no local jurisdiction can move against the state's regulations. They cannot directly conflict them. So there's this. Watersheds are identified into 5 different categories. You have a watershed 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Watershed 5s are things that aren't close to watersheds. So, Town of Troy, watershed 5. Don't have it. Watershed 5s are essentially, you don't have any special watershed rules against you. Watershed 4s are those watersheds that are located right next to things like Baden Lake, Lake Tillery, public water sources, recreational waters, things like that. The further down the list you get from watershed 4 down to watershed 1, the more restrictive the development regulations are. Well, right now, and I actually talked to some local members about, when I say local members, I mean of the Piedmont Triad region, and I was talking to some of their watershed administrators about this conundrum that we've got. Well, right now, the state says if you are developing less than an acre in a watershed 4, which is right beside a Baden Lake. And the term's not developing, it's land disturbing activity. If you're doing less than 1 acre of land disturbing activity, you do not need to secure what's called a sediment erosion control plan. Well, some of our local jurisdictions in the Piedmont Triad region have, after suffering the consequences of ill-fated costs, they have recommended that to their boards that this rule be changed from 1 acre to 1/2 an acre to better capture some of these multi-phase developments. And so what that means is that there was a storage facility, I remember about 3 or 4 months ago, where they had altogether way over an acre of land disturbing activity. Now, because they didn't have to secure a sediment erosion control plan, none of the watershed regulations that regulated built upon area came into effect. And built upon area are things that are impervious surfaces. So this building, the pavement, the sidewalk, all of that would be built upon area. So that's the problem. Now, there are going to be more watershed changes to come, if I'm going to be quite honest. So the state is doing something very similar to the current changes that we were mandated to adopt today, the 160D changes. They are having required watershed or WSWP changes that must be adopted. Now it's in the public comment period right now at the state level, and so unfortunately the planning director at Randolph County and myself, we thought that they would come out in time to kind of Trojan horse with the 160D changes so that we could just rip the Band-Aid off all at once. But they are not going to make it in time, which is why, I'm saying today, this change, we can have more discussion about this. This is a very highly technical change. It's a highly technical topic. I think I would agree with the planning board's recommendation to not include it.
Yes, especially if changes are coming, right,
More
let's just wait.
changes are coming.
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay, so good,
That
I
makes
would
sense.
agree.
So we can, and that way we can still talk about this later, which is what the planning board didn't say by any means. They weren't interested in this, but they said, it's 10 o'clock, I'm ready to go home.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and plus too, if there's additional things that could be impacted, let's wait and see what that is before we adopt any other change.
Right. And that's, to be honest with you, that is the temperature between a lot of local governments. So.
All right, so we're good, no to that.
So just overall, are there any questions and comments to me? And then I'll just revisit what I'm proposing as action from the Board of Commissioners.
So the ones that the planning board, the ones where you have a check and the X and all that, that's the ones that the planning board's gonna go back and talk about more?
Well, so
Wait.
we're going to make that decision today whether you guys approve or disapprove that. So the planning board acts as an advisory committee. They are advising whether you approve or disapprove something.
So if we don't want to go over their heads on anything today, and we want to wait and let them discuss it some more, we can do that.
You can certainly do that. If you guys would like to just take it off the docket altogether, because remember, these are the optional changes. These are the things that are optional, right?
Right.
So if you are just not comfortable with that type of relationship with the planning board, with saying, hey, we know you guys advised us we not do this thing, but we're going to go ahead and do it, then that's fine to say, we want to redelegate those tasks to you, or we want you to have an opportunity to revisit it.
And I think the only thing we did not agree with, or we were gonna move forward with that the planning board was that subdivision piece, that 50-foot buffer, the major subdivision standard changes, where if it is a associated subdivision, it could move forward without having to seek a variance. But they're the ones in the plat review process that would have to deem it an associated.
And this has been so long ago that this one's gonna have to start from the beginning, right?
Yeah. So that's I think from the discussion that we had, that was the topic that you guys differed from. But just as a point of correction, the things with the check boxes and the X's included on them, planning board's made up their mind. They want to see, let's find one. They want to see this. They want to see recombination as an additional requirement.
And we agreed with that.
That's their
Yes.
recommendation.
Yes,
So truthfully, the only one that they're not
it's that one.
Is about.
Is
the
these
buffer,
two.
Right,
is the watershed.
which there's more to come on that, so that's,
So that's us. We're saying,
Yeah,
let's
that's
not
not
move
even
forward with
debatable.
that.
Yeah, it's the watershed and the major subdivision standard changes for just the buffer.
Yes. The solar farms, we agreed with what they were doing. It was just the major
just the
subdivision.
buffer. And what was their reason for not doing that? I've forgotten.
So they wanted to preserve that rule. I have the minutes with me somewhere. Let's find it. So they were against it because this is the first instance, well, for a confluence of reasons. The comment was made that this is the first instance that this has come up. So they were against that proposed rule change because I described the exact same scenario to you guys and said this is something that we're currently seeing. So this is the first instance that this has come up to deter developers from coming in like 10, 20 years later and saying we want to develop more. Those were the two big things. But, there are, as I mentioned to them, I do think, truthfully, I think there are better instruments to regulate that than preserving a buffer rule. And so one of those instruments is actually watershed stuff, which is going to come.
So that's probably what we need to wait and look at. Let them look at it. If we're gonna give them more authority, then I think we need to honor their opinion.
Okay. Yeah, so what you're recommending is that this one be just stricken from the docket, like we're not including it with the ordinance changes today, and then we're letting the planning board review it again in another text amendment procedure. Okay.
That's my recommendation.
I'm fine with that.
All right. Ooh, excuse me. Just leaning on it. Okay, so then we're moving forward with the questions and comments. I don't have, was that the last questions? I don't have any additional comments other than what I'm asking as an action from commissioners.
No more questions from me.
No more questions? Okay, so for an official action, as I mentioned, across those 300 pages, and I should preface this, I have had the procedure I'm about to propose be blessed by a living legend of zoning and legal law in the Piedmont Triad region, at least. She pretty much wrote the books for a lot of our local jurisdictions. So she has blessed it. She said that she just recently did it with a community up in Surrey County. So what I'm proposing is that we readopt the entirety of the Code of Ordinances. And what that means is that the Code of Ordinances, that 300 pages, that's your Code of Ordinances. So we're asking for a readoption of that and the adoption of a consistency statement as well. Now, the alternative is what this board is probably more familiar with text amendments. They are called ordinance amendments. And ordinance amendments, they're just a little bit more exhaustive. And to be honest with you, an ordinance amendment of this size would, I mean, with how many changes there are, it would be a lot. But we can certainly do it.
So if we readopt the ordinances, these two things that we just talked about that we want to hold on, are they part of that?
No, so that's a great question. So you guys are making a decision right now how many of these optional things you want to keep in or take out. And if you want to take them out, they're took out.
Just those two we want
Yeah.
to
So
take out. Okay.
so right. So you guys are making a decision tonight to adopt the Code of Ordinances as you would like to see it, and staff has a version of that ordinance, just not with myself today
Right.
to sign, because there are so many different things that could have happened between the planning board's advisory decision and what you guys ultimately decided on.
So we would be adopting it, but without those two things.
Correct.
And then also in that adoption, is that also transferring power, quasi-judicial piece over to the Board of Adjustments, over to the Planning Board?
That is another great question. So, you guys can do that as a separate motion at this meeting.
Okay,
Okay.
okay. Any questions?
David, the markup version that we sent to them, does that reflect planning board changes or the original changes?
That reflects the original changes.
Okay.
So I have a version of the planning board changes,
Which would
Okay.
take these two out.
which would take these two out. Yes.
So, if I understand it correctly, with our conversation, we haven't differed from the planning board recommendation.
Correct.
No, that's correct.
So,
Yeah.
they would simply adopt the planning board
yes.
recommendation.
That's a
Yes.
better way to put
There
it.
you go, yes,
That's fine.
yes.
All right.
Okay,
So can we close the public comment period and then let you make, I guess, the motion that you're looking for to get it cleared?
do we
'Cause
need to open a
we
public?
need to close the public comment period.
Let's see
correct?
the agenda.
Staff presentation, public comment period.
Yes.
Motion to close the comment period.
Yes, so I'm done with my presentation, so,
And then when it comes time to motion for action, have you speak, so we'll know exactly where we're headed.
okay, glad to. Thank you, guys.
Is anyone else here that wants to speak in the public comment period? Hearing no one, do I have a motion to close the public comment period?
I will make a motion to close the public comment period.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Dawson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Hassel. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now we're gonna go to the motion for action on the TA 102021. If you'd like to make all that up, unless someone knows all what you said that you want to put out.
So officially, I'm looking for, or the county is looking for, the adoption of the revised Code of Ordinances that follows the recommendations of the planning board outlined in their consistency statement.
Okay, let me see if I can say this. I will make a motion that we adopt the revised Code of Ordinances and recommendations made by the planning board and their consistency statement.
Beautiful.
We have a motion made by Commissioner Dawson. I'm looking for a second.
I'll second.
seconded by Commissioner Hassel. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And does that,
And one more, actually two more.
okay.
The next one is, I would like the county commissioners to adopt a consistency statement of the recently adopted changes.
Would someone like to make that motion that we adopt the consistency statements?
Of tax amendment 1/2021.
I will make a motion that we adopt the consistency statement for TA 01 2021.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Dawson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Dottie Robinson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And you have one more.
And the optional is, can they do this now, the appointing of the planning board as the, okay.
Yep.
The appointment of the planning board members as the Board of Adjustments.
Would someone like to make that motion?
I'll make the motion that we appoint the planning board
As the Board of Adjustments.
as the Board of Adjustments.
I
Motion-
second
Motion's
that.
been made by Commissioner Dottie Robinson. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Motion, seconded by Commissioner Dawson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That gets you squared away?
Yes,
All
sir.
smiles?
All smiles, ear to ear.
Fan myself.
Montgomery
Yeah.
County moving forward. Okay, county managers reports.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very brief. On the coattails of development conversations, I will point to some of the county reports you have in your agenda packet and just make note of the activity in development and construction in the county. One note in particular, I believe we're ahead of pace in environmental health with the request for on-site septic permits, which is mostly residential, but is a sign of increased development activity. So just a note on that. I don't have anything else I would like to point out.
Frankie, what's the name of our new building inspections person, or whatever that,
Gene Peel.
thank you, I couldn't remember.
David, I'd just like to say thank you for all the work you and the planning board has put in this, and look
Yes,
forward
thank
to letting the planning board take over a lot. That's the thing I'm most interested in. And Frankie, thank you for all the budget work and all the employees that put in. I don't have anything else to.
No, I just want to share, because Ms. Cagle is here, that we will, Juneteenth is this Saturday, correct? So downtown Troy, so if you have ability, I think it's from 8 to noon, is that correct? Or, yeah, 8 to noon. So if you have ability to come out and support, so I know streets will be blocked, and hopefully, lots of folks will come out and celebrate what that means to the community, so.
All welcome to come, please.
Thank you.
My shop's right there, so I'll be right there.
Does anyone else have any thoughts, questions, comments? David, you did real good. Sir Pizza's still open.
All right.
Would someone like to make a motion that we adjourn?
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Hassel. Do I have a second?
A second.
Second by Commissioner Dottie Robinson. All in favor?